We are coming to the close of the year. Another 1 week, we are entering into 2025. I don't know what your feelings are, but some of us must be feeling weary, tired. Some of us are worried, anxious. In the hymn writer's language, cumbered with a load of care. Not sure what the year ahead or years ahead holds for us. Many things that we have been praying for, yearning for, has not come. And you are not sure whether there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Often we feel this pilgrim journey is so weary. How I wish the Lord come. If that's your feeling this morning, in any way, if you're seated here or perhaps listening to us in the online, the Spirit of the Lord has a word for you this morning. May we read from God's word. Psalms 84. Psalms 84 has got a title that tells us a psalm for the sons of Korah. This psalm is associated with the sons of Korah in some way. Not necessary that the immediate sons of Korah wrote. It could be the descendants of the sons of Korah, or it is written by them or for them or in some way associated with them. That's all that we mean by reading that heading, a psalm of the sons of Korah. There are other psalms also written by the sons of Korah or associated with the sons of Korah. They are found in two sets. The first set you have from chapter 42 to 49. That's one set of psalms which are associated to sons of Korah. And then comes the second set, which is Psalms 84 to 89. In between there is one psalm, Psalms 86, which is associated to David. Otherwise, that's the second set that is between Psalms 84 to 88. If you compare these two sets of sons of Korah psalms, we see a linkage between them too. For example, Psalms 84 and the first set of sons of Korah psalms between Psalms 42 and 43, if you look at it, you will see a linkage of theme in that. I'll just give you one example. Psalms, while you keep your finger at Psalms 84, where we are going to come back, Psalms 42 verse 2, if you look at it. Psalms 42 verse 2. My soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? Now I've come to chapter 84 verse 2. The second sets of sons of Korah psalms. Psalms 84 verse 2. My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cries out for the living God. You can see that common theme there. Longing for the presence of God. And in both words, you will see the title of God as living God. In the entire book of Psalms, these are the only two places you will see that title given to God, the living God. You see that striking linkage between these two words and the verses and the desire of the psalmist. But there is a striking difference between these two psalms. The first one, Psalms 42, as we read, is the heart cry of a person who is not able to come to God's presence. And hence, that's his heart's cry because of his circumstances. He is shut out in some place and not able to come to the presence of God for some reason, and hence the heart cry, how wish I could come. My soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? But Psalms 84 is a very different tune. It's a pilgrim started his journey to the presence of God. And there in Psalms 84, the pilgrim is filled with joy, the hope, and he is going to see the presence of God in Zion in some time. He has so much of joy and spring in his steps, and he is picking up himself and going towards the journey towards Jerusalem. And that's the joy in which he's saying, my soul longeth, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cries out for the living God. So that's a striking difference. So Psalms 84, we can call it the Pilgrim's Progress if you wish to. Psalms 84 is a pilgrim's words and a pilgrim's mindset that we see here. Just to give a background, all Israelites, all men of Israelites were necessarily to be present at Jerusalem 3 times a year. That was commanded that they should. All the men of Israel has to come these 3 times in Jerusalem, and that was associated with 3 festivals. The first one, you remember? Passover. Passover was the first festival. We have that in Exodus chapter 23, Deuteronomy chapter 16. We are not going there. Passover festival, they have to come. And the second one was the weeks, the festival of weeks, or it was called the festival of Pentecost. And the third one was the festival of Tabernacle. Yes, you're right. Tabernacle, or festival of booths, or festival of tents as they call it. Now, which festival is this one that it is written as a background? Maybe a small hint you will get about the time and the festival in verse 6 of chapter 84, where you read the rain. That's in KJV, but in NIV it is autumn rains. And if you look at an amplified version, you will get early rains. Now, that's easy. If you know what is the autumn or early rains in Israel, you get to see which festival happens in that time. That's the time, end of October or the beginning of November, and that's the time you have the festival of tabernacles, or festival of tents, or festival of booths happens in Israel. So, here is a pilgrim, along with a lot of pilgrims, together on the road to Jerusalem, going to rejoice in the presence of God, and they're going to live in tents. So, the background of the festival of tents are also known to you. I'm just brushing that to your memory. We have Israelites coming out of Egypt, and they were coming to Canaan. On their way in the wilderness, they were living in tents. In order to keep them reminded of their lives and the way God has led them in their journey from Egypt to Canaan in tents, God has commanded once in a year, all of you should come together in Jerusalem. And even if you have a house in Jerusalem, doesn't matter. All of you should create tents around the temple. And remember the way God kept you in those tents in wilderness journey. And in your journey too, life journey, I am going to hold you. And that's the reminder, and that's the festival of this festival of booths, or festival of tents. Psalms 84 can be divided into 3 stanzas. It is a song, as you know. We don't know the tune of Hebrew in this and how did they sung. We don't have any recording of that. No Zoom was there on those days. So maybe towards the end we will sing a song of that. This morning my family was telling about that song. Look, peeping into my note. So we will sing that at the end of it. But this can be having 3 stanza. How do we divide that stanza? Very simple. They have given an interlude in between, the word Selah. Okay? The word Selah is basically perhaps a musical interlude in between the song. You don't know, one stanza you sing, and then Johnny plays a little while in the evening gospel meeting, you will hear that. And then the second stanza comes. That's interlude, a pause. An interlude between is the Selah. So there are 2 Selahs inserted to divide the psalm into 3. You see that in verse 4, end of it. Did you see Selah? Yes. And verse 8, you see another Selah? Okay, now tell me, how do we divide these psalms? 1 to 4 is one stanza. Then you have 5 to 8, the second stanza. And then 9 to 12, a third stanza. Good class. Very good. Now, all the 3 stanza has a beatitude inserted in it. What is beatitude? Beatitude, you must have seen a blessed, pronouncement of blessedness. That's what beatitude is. The famous beatitudes we have in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is telling, isn't it? Blessed are the poor. Blessed are they that mourn. Blessed are the merciful. Or blessed are the pure in heart. These are blessings or blessedness that is being pronounced. Now, each of these stanza in chapter 84, you will see a blessedness pronounced, and they are the backbone of the pilgrim. The song is rest on these 3 pillars, and let's read them first. In the first section, verses 1 to 4, the blessedness pronounced in verse 4. Verse 4 you read there, blessed are they that dwell in thy house. You see that? Yeah, that means blessedness of dwelling in God's presence. That's the first blessingness. Happiness. The Greek word is makarios, that is happy. It's the pronouncement of blessing. Second section, if you come, and verse 5 you see the beatitude or blessedness. What is verse 5? Blessed is the man whose strength is in thee. That is the second blessedness in the second stanza. Then comes the third stanza and the third blessedness, verse 12. Blessed is the man that trusteth in thee. So 3 blessedness, 3 beatitudes inserted in the 3 sections of this psalm. The first one, the blessedness of dwelling in God's presence. Second one, the blessedness of drawing on God's strength. And the third one, the blessedness of depending on God himself. The blessedness of dwelling in God's presence, the blessedness of drawing in God's strength, and the blessedness of depending on God himself. With that introduction, shall we get into chapter 84 and verse 1. How amiable are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts. That's the KJV version. To much of the sorrow of my dear young friend here, I am going to read, Anurag, from other translation as well. Young's literal translation, how beloved thy tabernacles, Jehovah of hosts. Different translation gives us a little more clarity of meaning. So, how beautiful is written in some translation. But actually, this word really means to say how beloved, how much I love, how much lovely for me, how well loved is thy presence, thy tabernacles. Now, tabernacles is used in plural basically because it's including the building of temple and all the courts around it. That's why the plural word is that used there. So it's not talking about how lovely it is aesthetically. It was beautiful. But that's not, that aestheticity is not in question. That's not what aesthetically how grand this is. That's not the question here. How well beloved is this place, his presence for me? For God's faithful people, they love that presence of God in that place because it is the dwelling place of the Lord of who? Hosts. You see that word? God is called the Lord of hosts. Why it is so lovely, so well beloved place for me? Not because it's looking grand. It's because it is the place, the presence of God made known in that place, and that God is the Lord of hosts. Which are the hosts God has? We may think it is the army of Israel. No. The Lord of hosts has all the hosts that you can imagine in heaven and in earth. Every angel stands in awe before him. And the power of angels that you see in the scriptures, one man can kill lakhs and lakhs in no time. Destructive power. You can see they are all standing just to listen to God and carry out his purpose. Like angels of fire. They're just waiting to carry out God's will. That's why Jesus, when he taught the prayer to disciples, he said that let thy will be done as it is what? In heaven. Why? If God decides something to do, the hosts of angels are just waiting on their wings to carry it out. All the hosts are on his disposal. All the hosts in earth also are in disposal. Who are the hosts on earth? Anything and everything can be his host. It could be, if I am not having money to pay tax, oh, you Peter, go to the sea and put your fish there. I will send one of my hosts come there with a coin that he can pay your tax. The fish is part of his host. A donkey can be his part of his host. If you are hungry, having no money to buy food, it could be a crow coming in your way and giving you the food. Anything and everything in this earth is under his command. The Lord of hosts. How amiable, O Lord, thy presence is. You are the God of hosts. I love you, Lord. The Lord of hosts. Verse 2. My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cries out for the living God. Because the Lord is so powerful, the whole hosts of heaven and earth under his command, the psalmist cannot contain his emotions. He wants to be in that place. He wants the place where he has made his presence known. Hence, his heart longs for him. Now, what is the word longeth? Earnest desire is expressed. In the New Testament, Apostle Paul brings that same word in a different context. You have that in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 2. For in this we groan. He's talking about the tent. Paul himself was a tent maker, if you remember. Okay, we are in the festival of tabernacles or tents that we are talking about. Paul himself was a tent maker. And he's talking about his body, his tent. He's saying that, for in this tent we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven. How I wish my earthly tent is transformed into God's glorious program of having me another body. And I long for that. That word, earnestly desiring, is the same word that we have in Psalms 84. I long for it. How apostle wish for the heavenly body, that he would be transformed into body of glory. What made psalmist long or earnestly desire for God's presence or courts of the Lord? I said it is not the grandeur of the temple. I add to that, it is not the elaborate rituals of the temple. They were elaborate. They were very beautifully done, well-dressed people and priests who come and do all those stuff. That's not what made him long. It's not the company of like-minded people in the road. Oh, so-and-so and says so-and-so, oh, that brother, that sister, all of them are there. We are all got together. It's not that company of those people made him long for the presence of God. He was a singer and he's making a song. It is not even the song or the worship leaders or the worship that you have around that's making him long for it. His longing is for the living God. That's another title now that you see. The longing for the living God. God himself is the final object of his desire. Temple and the songs and the fellow travelers and the rituals all are just means to my ultimate goal of having God himself and his presence. My dear brothers and sisters, when we come to the church, we have fellowship. We have the table. We have the preaching. We have the songs. We have fun. We have many things. But what is the object ultimately? Is this what the object in itself? No, they are not. The object is the living God. How will I be in his presence? How do I take my strength from this living God and worship this living God? Verse 3 and 4, the last two verses of the first stanza. Yea, the sparrow hath found an house, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young, even thine altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Blessed are they that dwell in thy house, they will be still praising thee. And then there is an interlude, Selah. Psalmist is painting a beautiful verbal picture here and coming out with this and thinking about it or describing the enviable position of two sets of beings in the presence of God. The first one, small birds. I'm not going into detail of those birds. The small birds, maybe the common birds that you see around in Jerusalem. And then the second, verse 4, is the Levites who is living in Jerusalem in the temple. Two sets of people, or rather two sets of beings. So we'll see the first set of being, verse 3. These small birds, probably common sparrows or swallows that were there around, they are the humblest beings. They are not very exquisite, very sought after birds. It's like pigeons in Thane. Right? It's not that, oh wow, pigeon, nobody stays. You try to shoo it away, right? It's such common things. So common beings around in that place. So nobody wanted these kinds of stuff. If you want to see the value of that in Jerusalem, you can see the examples, or in the New Testament also. You will get one free if you take four. That's the kind of value they have. It's absolutely having no great value or great favor about that. So these common small birds out there, not only they fly around in the temple precincts, you see there, they have made their home in that place. The area around the altars, maybe the temple eaves that you have, in that they have made their nests, and they have babies there, and they have absolutely comfortably placed in that place. And whoever comes there is a temple, there is a festival of tabernacles, etc. Doesn't bother them. They are just in that place, so comfortable. They made their home there. The children are growing there. Generations are there. Oh, psalmist say, oh wow, what joy these feather friends have, if you can call them. And then there is verse 4 tells about another group, that's human beings. That's Levites that we have there. Levites were highly favored people. Unlike these common birds, they are humblest beings. And you have here the highly favored group in verse 4. That's the Levites, the top class of Israelites tribes, if you want to call that way. So they come to the temple and they stay in the temple according to their turns. And once they are in, and if it is their turn, they are all the time in the temple and they do the service of God in the temple. We know that in Numbers chapter 16 verse 1, sons of Korah belong to the Levites group. And from a branch of Kohath, they all comes through. So, sons of Korah who wrote this are Levite, part of Levites. And he is one of them. He knows what it means to be in the presence of God. It is good to be a visitor in the temple. It's nice. 3 times a year, every Israelite comes to the temple. That's exciting. But sons of Korah is not satisfied with it. How great it would be to live in that temple. I just don't want to be a visitor on that temple. Why? They will be still praising God. Or in other words, they will ever be praising God. They will be constantly praising God. They will be continually praising God. They will be again and again praising God. That's why their position is so enviable. In some way or the other, or another some way, the feathered friends that common birds also do in the same thing. They are still praising God in their own way. Hence, I love to dwell in the presence of God. Let's go to the second section. That is drawing on God's strength. First one was dwelling on God's presence. Second one is on drawing on God's strength. So verse 5 to 8, the camera is shifting from the pilgrimage, from the temple courts, which was the presence of God, and it is turning the camera to the road, the pilgrim road, the road to Jerusalem. And in that road, you will see spiritual joy of the crowd of the pilgrims pursuing their journey towards Jerusalem. That's what we have there. Let's look at verse 5. Verse 5. Blessed is the man, happy is the man whose strength is in thee, in whose heart are the ways of them. That's not a clear translation. KJV, let me read for you from Amplified Version, which tells, blessed and greatly favored is the man whose strength is in you. Second line, in whose heart are the highways to Zion. In whose hearts are the highways to Zion. NIV is also very clear, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. That's the word that is being talking about. So, coming to Jerusalem, in a way, was a compulsion for Israelite men. But for this psalmist, it is not a compulsion. For him, it is a great joy, blessedness, joyfulness is what we will sing. Why it is so joyful? Because the pilgrim draws his strength from this Lord of hosts. The journey is not very easy. Journey is hazardous. And you're going to see in a next verse the kind of journey that they are undertaking. That's not very happy journey. It's not a bullet train or a Dreamliner aircraft that is coming on your way. Journey is hard. It is tough. It's time consuming. It's energy sapping. But I'm going to draw the strength from the Lord of hosts. Where else you have greater source of energy to drive your path? And here, that's the reason why he is looking. Hence, his heart is fixed and focused on the highway or of Zion or to Zion. Verse 6. You see the kind of road that they're going through? Who passing through the valley of Baca, make it a well, the rain also filleth the pools. Again, sorry, KJV is not giving a good meaning or rather expression there. Amplified Version I will read for you. Passing through the valley of weeping of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The early rain also covers it with blessing. Their ultimate focus is to reach to the temple. And here they have two things that they are experiencing along the way. One is, verse 6, abundant blessings that they are experiencing. And verse 7, abnormal strength that they are getting. These are the two things that they are getting out there. Abundant blessings and abnormal strength. Now, why do you need that? You need that because the terrain that you're passing through now is the valley of Baca, or valley of weeping, or vale of weeping, as you may call it. You have in the Old Testament, 2 Samuel chapter 5, 1 Chronicles chapter 14, etc., the same word Baca is translated as balsam trees. You can see that words there, balsam trees. Now, balsam trees are a very peculiar kind of trees which had the kind of gum which exudes from them. From its bark seems to be like weeping. And literally it looks like weeping. The tree is weeping, and hence that tree is known to be the weeping tree. So the valley of Baca means to say a valley of tears, a valley of weeping, a valley of wailing, if you may call it. God's people throughout all eras have gone through this valley in one way or the other, in one time or the other, en route to our heavenly home. Vale of tears. If you are one of them, looking forward and wondering, how am I going to go through this? It's a valley of tears. May the word of God tell you a word adjacent to that word. Passing through the valley of tears. You are not a permanent resident in that valley. You are only passing through. You will be through, my dear brother. You will be through, my dear sister. There is a beautiful Malayalam song. I will translate that for you. Oru marayum thoradirunnittilla. There was no rain that never stopped. Oru kaattum adangadirunnittilla. There was no wind that never ceased. Oru raavum pularadirunnittilla. There was no night that never ended. Oru novum kurayadirunnitilla. There was no pain that never terminated. Tiramalayil ee cheru thoniyil amarathan narige avanulladal. Because in those stormy waves, he sits next to me in my little boat, passing through the valley of Baca. Now we may feel a kind of depression as we hear that. But that's not the mood in that valley right now. As Sam is passing through the valley of Baca, which is real, which is not something that you can wash away and wish away. It is real pain. It is real tears. It is wailing. But what he is experiencing here is very, very different. It's filled with joy. It's filled with strength of the Lord. Verse 5. And a place of spring it becomes. They also make that dry and desolate terrain into a pool of blessing. The happy hope of reaching God's temple very, very shortly, knowing fully well that this Baca valley is only a passing through. They transform their dreary and desolate valley into a place of refreshment of the Lord. Same is so true for us as well, isn't it? In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 14 we read, For here have we no continuing city, but we seek one to come. And Revelation 12:21-2 talks about that. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. The anticipation of seeing Lord's day help us to transform the most dark and dreaded days of our weeping into a pool of joy. We read that ultimately in Revelation chapter 21 verse 4. God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. If you remember Johnny Erickson Tada, the girl who was an athlete, swimmer, and in an accident of swimming, she lost her entire sensation from neck below. You remember that story? That is, I'm sure you might have read the story. She can't move her body at all. Greatly used by the Lord, still alive. Now, she has written a very interesting word like this. And in her, reflecting on Revelation 21:4, where God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, she has written like this. At the point when I do have the use of my arms to wipe away my own tears, I don't have them. But when there is a time when all my arms will be ready to wipe my tears, I don't have to. God will do it for me. How do we respond in the valley of Baca is what the point is. Either we can wail and go depressed, or we can turn our sorrow into joy. Someone rightly said, I quote, a yacht or a boat can go east or west by the self-same wind that blows. It is set of the sail. Sail is the instrument through which they can turn the boat to either which side. It is set of the sails and not the gales which determines the way it goes. Gale is strong wind. It's not the wind that determines which way you go. It is a sail that determines which way you go. It's on us to decide in this pilgrim journey. It's not two ways that we will face the valley of Baca. All of us will face it one time or the other. It is on us to draw on the strength of God and set our sail towards Jerusalem, towards the heavenly city, and have the present day make a pool of blessing for ourselves. Verse 7, they go from strength to strength. Every one of them in Zion appeareth before God. A pilgrim journey, as it progresses, we go weaker and weaker, don't we? You want to walk from here to Pune? More you walk and reaches almost Lonavala, you will be dead. We will go weak to weaker. Here is they are going strength to strength. They are defying all odds. Why? It is they are not depending on their own strength. It's on the Lord of hosts from which they are drawing their strength. And the prospect of appearing before this living God gives them a spring in their steps. Verse 8, O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer, give ear, O God of Jacob. Why Jacob is brought in here? That has a history. So you have a Jacob who was running away from God, who has gone through the valley of Baca many a times. And if their forefather was kept safe and reached to the destination, if that same God is the one that's going to hold me through and see me through these things, the God of hosts who can hold Jacob strong till his end of journey, is the same God that can hold his descendants as well. That's what the psalmist is trying to tell. He will hold me through. Then comes the final section, section 3, verses 9 to 12. Blessedness of depending on God himself. Verse 9, behold, O God our shield, and look upon the face of thine anointed. Psalmist is praying about an anointed. Anointed here, with all probability, is talking about king, one of those clans of David. So he's saying, you take care of the king, Lord, because he is the one who becomes a shield for us, for the people. And through the king, To the king you be the shield, and he will be a shield for ourselves. And verse 10, for a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. I just want you to note two words here. The meaningful comparison he is making between these two things. The wickedness, tents of wickedness, they are in the celebration of tents. You remember, don't forget that. They are coming for the festival of tents here. So the tents of wickedness, and then there is a doorkeeper in the house of God. He is making a very great comparison between these two and saying one is better than the other. Which are they? Tents of wickedness. Now, Korah, sons of Korah who has written this, or for whom it is written, they have a association with some tens in Numbers. In Numbers chapter 16 verse 26, their forefather Korah and his friends together rebelled against Moses and Aaron, and because of that God himself said that they rebelled against me. And then we read in chapter 16 verse 26, Moses is saying, depart, oh, I pray you, from the tens of these wicked men. Looking at Korah, their forefather, he said that depart from their tens. God is going to destroy them. And everybody ran away from that place. And then the earth opened up. And the tens of these people, along with them, were buried alive under the ground. And the earth closed down. Tens of wickedness. It's God's mercy that Korah's children escaped from that place. They were not in that tents. Looking back to their own history, sons of Korah saying, oh, how better it is not to be in the tents of wickedness, but to be the doorkeepers in the house of God. What is the speciality of doorkeeping in the house of God? As you know, by God's mercy, some of these sons of Korah, who were, of course, were Levites, were allowed to be the doorkeepers of the house of God. Some of them become singers in the house of God as well. We have one of the most famous sons of Korah in 1 Samuel, and that is Samuel himself, Samuel the prophet. He was also a son of Korah. So you have that in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 15. What was his occupation when he started? 1 Samuel chapter 3 verse 15. And Samuel lay until the morning. He was a young boy there. And Eli was the high priest there. And opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was the doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. Perhaps he must be thinking back. Oh, how better it is to be the doorkeeper of God's house than to be in the tents of wickedness. He's clear about what he wanted. In the house of God, I would get the most meanest, most humblest job or service that I can do for the Lord is far better than being the leaders in the tents of the wickedness. What's our attitude? Verse 11. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. There are two reasons he is saying why he choose between these two. And choose the most humblest service in God's presence. What are the two things? One is because that which God is. And the second reason is because of what God does. First reason is for what God is. We have the Lord God is a sun and shield. And the second reason is for what God does. He does give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from those who walk uprightly. No, so we see the first thing because of what God is. He's saying God is a sun and a shield. If you feel you are going through a darkness, not knowing what is the next step, not sure how things will change, you are not able to see. I'm a kind of a claustrophobic feeling that you're feeling. I don't know what is next. It is completely dark. Here comes, God is a sun for you. A source of light. A source of energy. A source of joy. He enlightened our lives. He enliven our life. That's what our God is. He's also a shield, a defender, a protector. If you think you are in danger, you think everything is getting stopped and you don't know what next, and enemies are coming close to you and you don't know where to run, God is your shield. Genesis chapter 15 verse 1 we read, "Fear not, Abraham, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." The moment Abraham was told that, immediately his question was, "What will thou give to me, Lord?" Verse 2. What will thou give to me, Lord? But psalmists don't have any such questions. Psalmist has his answers ready. What will you give me, Lord? He knows the answer. He sells the answer. You give me three things: grace, glory, and good things. We all started with grace. By God's grace, you are in the household of God. We all will end with glory when we all gone by from this place. When our Lord comes, we all will revel in His glory. But in between these two, you have no good things that God is going to ever withhold from you for those who walk uprightly. If you want to read that verse and see that promise in the light of New Testament, you can read it from Romans chapter 8 verse 32. "He that spared not his son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things?" It is impossible that God withhold the good that you have, good that meant for you, from giving it to you. We often mistake what is good for us. That's the difference. I remember my father interpreting Matthew chapter 7 verse 9 to 11 in a very different light. That's the first time I heard that in that way. Matthew chapter 7 verse 9 to 11 we read, "Which man is there of you, whom if his son ask bread, will he give him a stone? Or if he ask a fish, will he give him a serpent?" So my father interpreted it in another way. He said that sometimes as children, we see a snake going around and we think that's a fish. And we wanted that snake. "How that fish, that fish, that fish." And the father won't give it to us. Sometimes it's bread-looking stone there. And the child is crying out and saying, "That's the bread I want, that's the bread I want." The Father in His wisdom don't give it to us. He withhold no good things that you and I needed. If you, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give you good things to them that ask Him? Dear brothers and sisters, cheer up. He gives us mercy. He gives us grace. He gives us glory. He also gives us good. And with that, he concludes in verse 12. "O Lord of hosts." He began with that same word. Lord of hosts. "O Lord of hosts, blessed is the man that trusteth in thee." That's the final beatitude. Trust reflected on these three things. If you and I trust Him in our pilgrim journey, if you and I trust Him when we pass through the valley of tears, these are the three things that we will do. We will dwell in His presence. We will draw strength from Him. And we will depend only on Him. That's the three beatitude. And if you have that, your valley of Baca will turn into a spring of joy, a pool of blessing. Shall we sing song number 6? How lovely is your dwelling place. Tryphena was singing that song in the car as we were coming. And Bella stopped it and said, "That's very difficult to sing. Hope we are not lying." Song number 6. May we sing it meaningfully, not lying. Ask the Lord for forgiveness if our eyes were focused elsewhere, if our priorities were somewhere else. if we are adamant to get what we wanted rather than what God's will is, if we are not willing to let Him run our life, then we ourselves run the life. Hymn number 6, a pink book, song number 6.
How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. My soul longs and even faints for you. For here my heart is satisfied within your presence. I sing beneath the shadow of your wings. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere, than 1,000 elsewhere. One thing I ask, and I would seek to see your beauty, to find you in the place your glory dwells. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. My heart and flesh cry out to you, the living God. Your Spirit's water for my soul. I've tasted and I've seen. Come once again to me. I will draw near to you. I will draw near to you. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Better is one day in your courts, better is one day in your house, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere, than 1,000 elsewhere.
Is in things apart from you. Our attention diverts, O God, from being present, from being in your presence,